we talk about action being taken. This is Indigenous History Month, and we are continuing these very difficult but necessary conversations, but we bring it back to accountability for Indigenous peoples who have, in many ways, endured horrific experiences in residential schools, also the survivors and families and the generations of trauma. Here to join this discussion, Sid Sixero joins in this panel discussion. We have Cindy Blackstock, Executive Director of Children's First Nations Child and Family Caring Society of Canada, and residential school survivor Evelyn Korkmaz. Thank you to both of you for joining in this.
Good morning.
Morning to both of you. Again, Cindy, I want to start with you. There has been a lot of reaction here after the story in Kamloops was reported. I mean, for everything from social media to our elected officials at the highest level to international reaction. What do you make of that reaction? What has surprised you about it?
Well, I think the stories, including the stories of the St. Anne's residential school survivors and others, are piling up on the Canadian consciousness. And people are becoming aware of just what an egregious violation this is, not only of the rights of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, but of the Canadian fundamental consciousness as well. And people are tired of government babble-gab, and they want real action to stop the injustices. But we need to learn the lessons of history, and that is we need to keep our eye on what government does, because every time the media and the public look away, children continue to be harmed by the Canadian government, and their families do too. And in fact, just in a couple of days, Canada is going to continue to fight against this generation of First Nations children in court.
Cindy, we will continue that part of the conversation in just a moment. I do want to bring in Evelyn into this discussion. You attended a residential school, and I've heard several stories, and they are horrific. Can you share with us some of your experiences? And sadly, for a lot of Canadians, some are only learning about this now. And for many, this is no surprise that this has been going on and continues. There are several traumas that continue today. So can you share with our viewers your experiences?
My experience is no worse than any other residential school survivor. I am a student on student abuse, claimant, I guess you would call me. And I was not abused by clergy, but I was abused by people that were abused by clergy. And there was no love, there was no affection, there was no anything that had anything to do with compassion in that school. It was a very dark, cold, institutional-like environment, I would say. So it was hard. It was tough, yes. But a lot of people had it much more tougher than I did. But it's something that happens to you as a child, and it follows you all the way through your life. And I have decided that enough is enough, and I'm going to raise my voice, even though I have a speech impediment that comes from my abuse, actually, because it scared me so much because I didn't know what happened to me at the age of 10. And yes, I have to fight for the next generation that this does not happen, that Indigenous people have a voice, and we are recognized and believed that these truths are true. And Canadians are starting to wake up and see what Indigenous people go through and have been going through and still go through today. It's just amazing how resilient we are, how we have to fight for our rights as human beings on a daily basis. That shouldn't be happening in Canada. This is our country.
Evelyn, we appreciate you speaking up. We appreciate you coming on. Cindy, in terms of some of the stories down through the decades that we've heard, like Evelyn's, I feel like some of the dialogue right now is well, why didn't you believe us? Cindy, do you have an answer for that? Why these stories are not new? Why were people just not believed down through the decades?
I think this is one of the things that is really important for Canadians to understand is there were people of the period who were raising the alarm. For example, Canada's own chief medical health inspector in 1907, Dr. Bryce, raised the alarm that Canada's unequal provision of healthcare funding in the schools and poor health practices were contributing to death rates of 25 to 50% in the schools. He came back to Ottawa under Prime Minister Laurier and demanded that they end the inequality and help these kids. Canada refused, and in 1907, his report was leaked to newspapers all across Canada. Headlines would read like, "The children are dying like flies," or that this bare inattention or absolute inattention to the bare necessities of health. And one person who read those reports was a lawyer, and his name is Samuel Hume Blake, and he said that in that Canada fails to obviate the preventable causes of death, it brings itself into unpleasant nearness with manslaughter. What's really important for Canadian public to know is that the Canadian government has known about the deaths of these children, had the tools to prevent it, and chose not to do it. And the reason that they were able to get away with it is that although there was public outrage from time to time, it always died down. The story always died down. And then Canada continued to perpetrate the abuses. So that, and there's also this absence of education in the school for the general Canadian public. That's part of the potion of colonialism. Keep the public in the dark as much as you can and feed them stereotypes. And that leads to this type of lack of belief or this kind of the stories bouncing back instead of really taking hold in the Canadian public as they are beginning to do now.
As they are beginning to do, and we will continue to do, and we're going to make this a priority here on Breakfast Television. Evelyn, I want to get your take here on this. We've heard from the Prime Minister speaking out, acknowledging the history and the present of what's happening. We heard Pope Francis put out this message, and I'm going to read it word for word, and this was via a tweet, and this was 2 days ago. I join the Canadian bishops and the whole Catholic Church in Canada in expressing my closeness to the Canadian people who have been traumatized by shocking discovery of the remains of 215 children and pupils at the Kamloops Indian Residential School. What does this tweet say to you, Evelyn?
Personally, I think the Pope needs to step up and apologize. Come to Canada and apologize. Or he needs to step down. It's amazing how an institution that tells us what's right and what's wrong cannot even do the right thing themselves. Everybody knows that this is a part of their history around the world, not just in Canada, but everywhere around the world. And we all need to get together as citizens of the world to stop this clergy sexual abuse of children. These are children of our future. We need to stand up and say, these people need to be accountable for what they are doing, and we need to stop. I fight for this for my grandchildren, Indigenous children, and children around the world. And, you know, we're letting them get away with it. It needs to end now.
Well, hopefully these conversations are the initial ones down a road. Hopefully it's not too long, but unfortunately it might be, where there can be some justice for a lot of people. Cindy and Evelyn, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This is the beginning of what we will be doing here on Breakfast Television, not just through this month, but for some time. And so we endeavor to do these panels and have these discussions, but not just the discussions, but to hold people accountable. So please do stay with us definitely throughout this month as this continues. We are putting up these lines here, crisis lines for those, as we talk about generational trauma, survivors, family members. These are triggering times, traumatizing times. So please utilize these resources if you feel you need to, and all of that is available on our website as well.
Thanks again to Cindy and Evelyn for that. All right, time for an update on traffic. Here's Steph. Steph, take it away.